Welcome, everyone. My name is Russ Selk, and I work for Butte County Office of Education in the K-12 High Speed Network. And with me today, I have my colleague, Rachel White. She also works for Butte County Office of Education and the K-12 High Speed Network. The goal of today's webinar is to take you through the 471 changes, actually take you online, and then recap some of the information that you'd want to have ahead of going online and filling out your Form 471 when you're ready to do that. So that's kind of an overview. We will have opportunity at the end for open question and answers. So I'll go ahead and get started. The first slide is slide number 2. What is the role of CDE K-12 HSN in the state library? Just a reminder that we don't have any statutory authority or administrative rights, so all the decision making is done by USAC in conjunction with the FCC rules. So if you have any questions or areas of gray zone, we encourage you to document that directly with the Client Service Bureau at USAC or through their website, PowerPoints, or documentation through the orders that are on the FCC website. So we're here to provide you best practices, information as it becomes available, but the actual final decision of taking that information and implementing it into your application process, again, that's where you have any questions, clarify that's directly with the FCC and USAC, with USAC. So just a reminder here that they did open the window for the 471 in January, and because of the new system changes, applicants have been finding it very challenging to do data entry. A medium-sized district, about 20 sites, I got some feedback that it used to just take them a couple hours to do their internal connection. It took them a full day to do it, and that was with all their data ready to input. So even though we have this extension, I think the best way to look at it is because you need more data entry and application time. So please don't wait. I encourage you, because all your 470, if you did it under the deadline, your 28 days have expired. So I would treat it as much as possible as if the March 26th is still the deadline, so that you don't get caught with any last-minute issues. So just encouraging you to go ahead and do that. So what is the Form 471? The mechanism for requesting funds, specific services such as voice and data transmission, specific dollar amount is what the 471 must have in it, the locations, the time frame of the service, meaning contract, certifies you allowed for that particular program. And just a reminder, as you walk through the process on slide 5, that you must have the Form 470 out for 28 days, including the RFP, receive your bids after the 28th day, evaluate it using a bid evaluation matrix, and there's an example that we've had in our past trainings as well as USAC has on their website, and remembering that price must have the highest weight. You award the bid, board approval if needed, and some districts do require that, so that must have gone in front of your board. Have your signed contracts before you do your final Form 471, and make sure you do it prior to April 16th. Unfortunately, I think everyone felt like a relief, and peers of ours in other states as the applicants have dropped off on data entry. USAC wanted us to remind applicants that those that get their applications in early will get processed for their approval letters earlier. So there's a financial incentive in terms of your application will get approved earlier, which could mean you could start seeing your discounts for your Category 1s a lot sooner in the next financial year. So just a reminder that a new Form 471 must be filed every year for month-to-month services and for continuing contracted services. And if you have information ready prior to starting your Form 471, here's some of those elements on slide 6. The enrollment NSLP for Category 2, you want to make sure you have all your cost data by site and remember what your budget is, and details of the online Item 21 template. So that'll help you because you'll need that information as you go to process and put your Form 471. So in slide 8, there's some I guess, helpful hints. Just a reminder that the Internet Explorer version 9 and 10 are the ones that they're recommended or supported, Firefox most recent version, and then also Safari the most recent version. So here's something we've received some direct feedback that you must always clear your browser cache, cookies, and history before you start your new Form 471. Some applicants have seen that the prior 471, because if you're doing Category 2 in addition to Category 1, your second application copies some of that data over into from the first application. So we encourage you to clear your cache. And also, too, at the top of the form, indicate where you're at in the application process. And you can see by that bottom of the slide, you have basic information, discounts, signing requests, etc. So on slide 9, and past trainings we mentioned that it might be helpful for you to do two Form 471s for your Category 1, one for existing ongoing data services, and then a separate 471 for the phase-out of your voice. However, from our own experience and some feedback, because you can separate your phase-down voice services into a separate funding request number, you can go ahead and just do it with one 471. But that's kind of a preference. But I think there's probably some advantages if you keep one 471 for Category 1, and you definitely want to do a separate 471 for Category 2 application. Slide 10. One thing, if you experience any error messages, save and exit out of the system. Print preview doesn't work, but you can always do screenshots to a PDF format or to a printer. So unfortunately, they won't have that solved with the printing screen that they had before a print application before the end of the window. And again, on bottom slide 10, we have a link to the SLD website, which gives daily updates, tips, so to speak, that helps you through the application process and information. So at this point, you can see our link. We have a test site. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rachel, and we're going to go online and show you how to go through the application process so you have a sense of what you're going to be doing if you haven't already.
Okay, so as Russ mentioned here on slide 11, we've got the link to both the training site as well as the live site. The only word of caution for you is to be sure you know which site you're on. And as I go over to the training site, there's a clear indicator for you to be aware of that helps you know exactly what site you are on. So going now to the Form 471 online, if you were to click on the link in the slide presentation, it would take you to the same area. But you'll notice on the right side of the screen in red letters running down the side, it says SLD training site. That is going to be your biggest indicator to let you know which site you're on, because other than that, the sites are they look exactly the same, and they function the same. So having said that, what we're going to do is take you through a Form 471 that we have already started, and hopefully you are at least this far into your process that you've already gotten one started. And in order to do that, we're just going to click on the button that says Continue, and we'll be asked to enter our application number and security code. One of the nice features of the new online system is that when you initially start your application, it actually emails you your application number and security code. Much nicer than in the past where you either had to write it down or take that screenshot. But now that we've entered that information, we are in our live form now. As Russ had mentioned earlier, you see the chevrons at the top of the screen. You can click on any one of these at any time in order to look at your funding request, look at your discount calculations, or if you know exactly where you left off in your form, you can just simply click that area and it'll take you straight to that part of the form. So just as a review, let's start at the beginning and walk ourselves through to remind ourselves what these different phases of the form look like. So when we click Next, should you be starting a new form, you'll see this information come at you in the exact same format as what we're seeing right now on the screen. It's going to ask you for the type of application, the recipients, are they private, public, charter, etc. You select however many of those apply to your situation, and then put in the information for the person who is submitting this application. That is the person who will receive the email that contains the security code and the application number. That does not have to be the contact person. We'll discuss who the contact person is on the next couple screens ahead. Once we click Next, we get to the screen that does give us our application number and our security code right underneath. And one thing I want to highlight on this screen is this opportunity for you to insert a nickname for your application. Now, this part isn't new. It's always been on the form. But what is new is that we're being told that the PIA reviewers are being told that they can communicate to you and identify the form based on that nickname should you prefer that. They can cite you a number, but sometimes that number doesn't jog your memory quick enough. If they cite the nickname you've given to your form, then that's going to remind you of what that form is about quicker than a simple number would do. So at least we're told this is going to be more useful to us now than it ever has been in the past. Clicking Next, now we get to the contact information. The first question is asking you if the consultant is assisting you. And the FLD has made it clear that the consultant doesn't even have to fill out the application in order for you to say, yes, a consultant is helping you. If you have had any consultant help you with this process at all, then you are to say, yes, you're using a consultant, and then you should cite that consultant registration ID number. If you're fully on your own and you've had no assistance from a consultant, then you select no, as we have done here, and then fill in the contact person information. The contact person, as always, will be the one who will receive email correspondence or perhaps mail correspondence from the TIA reviewers. So you'd want to make sure this person is readily available to their email and phone calls at any given time so that they can forward on this information to the appropriate person if they themselves happen not to be that person. As we scroll down and click next, now we're at the part of the application where you select what sort of service this application is. Because we've already started this one, it has been selected this is a Category 1 application. And once you select a category and proceed to the next screen, at that time the form is locked. You cannot go back and change this to a Category 2 application. As it was mentioned earlier, the system prohibits you from blending a Category 1 and Category 2 on the same application, which is to your benefit because that means that your Category 1 funding won't be slowed down because of Category 2 reviews. So we know this is a Category 1 application. Let's continue on. And now we're getting to the first area of the form where we have the option to use one of the new templates. And this is our discount calculation section. You'll also notice at the top of the form that our chevron has now changed to the discount calculation chevron, letting us know where we are on the form. So you can import, copy. Import meaning you're uploading your template, or you can copy the same information from a previously posted Form 470. Either one of those work very well. If you are a smaller district, you can enter one entity at a time by using the top button that says Enter Entity. Since we've already started this application, we have already gotten this information uploaded. So let's just take a look at it by clicking on the link that says Butte County Office of Education. That link will bring us to our list of entities within our district that qualify for E-rate services. You'll notice, we've discussed this in the past, the urban and rural status is indicated for every site except the non-instructional facility, which is listed on the bottom. As a matter of fact, the non-instructional facility has a yes in the NIF column, indicating that it is non-instructional. Because of that, when you scroll down to the discount calculation worksheet, you do not have the option of entering any data in the student information field. But on all of the other sites, let's say you got some updated information and you need to correct some of your entries, you can do so manually on this form just by clicking in the field. It's also interesting to note, or beneficial to note, that if you needed to add an entity, you realize you forgot one, on the top part of the screen, the entity information is budget calculation. You simply click the plus sign at the bottom and add a new row, which enables you to add a new entity. Now, if you make any changes here, at the bottom, the calculation discount rate is going to ask you to save and recalculate. We'll do that, and now it tells us that we're at a 90% discount and that we are an urban district. So moving on to the next screen, this is the connectivity questions. We encourage you to do your utmost to answer these in a truthful and complete way because it's designed to help the FCC gain a better understanding of the status of the nation's networks as a whole. And where do funds need to be directed in order to help clear up some of the less connected areas or the unconnected areas? And then what are some of the barriers that are prohibiting you from connecting all of your sites to the degree that is necessary to support your student learning? You only have to answer these questions once per application. Now we'll click Next. And we have now moved on to our funding request section of the form, as you see here at the top. And notice we already have 2 funding requests entered. We have one for voice, and we have one for wide area network, or WAN. The key information section is information that you're going to have for every funding request, and it is not uploadable by template. You can't fill this information out offline and then upload it. You have to have this information ready. And we do provide details on what all of this information is for you later in the PowerPoint. But notice again, we have this ability for a nickname for the funding request. We have a series of questions specific to this funding request. We'll scroll down. Information such as what is the establishing Form 470? Who is the service provider? Is there a billing account number? On that billing account number, you can enter as many numbers there as you choose to do. What sort of services are you purchasing? Tariff, month to month, or contracted? And we move on to some of the standard questions that have always been associated with any funding request. I will highlight a couple of the new questions though. For example, whether or not you have contract extensions on your contract. In this particular case, we're saying that we have 2 extensions left, and when you add those extensions to how many months are left without them, they want to know how many months in total are left on the contract, and this particular one ends in 60 months after extensions are included. The other new question, pricing confidentiality. In an effort for the SLD and FCC to make more transparent what all the different constituents are paying across the nation for similar services, they're making the item 21 available to everyone to see. The only exception would be if there is a statute, rule, or other restriction which prohibits the publication of your contract pricing. If there is, if we say yes, then you have to cite what that restriction is, the type of restriction and the restriction citation. So click no because we don't have any restrictions and move on. Once we click next, it takes us back to our funding request landing page. We'll see the next button is the item 21. Now please note, you can go up to the key information section and stop there, exit the system, and it saved your funding request. If you happen to do that, this section that says item 21 will have an exclamation point next to it indicating that it is missing data. You cannot submit your application if it's missing data. This item 21 is complete and it has a funding, an FRN calculation at the end. We can click on that calculation and it shows us basically what our funding request looks like. We see that our total charges are $1,557.50 a month, with $57.50 being ineligible. I wish I could scroll up and let you see the rest of it, but it doesn't want to work with me. Let me see if I can minimize my page one more time. And as I do this on your side, you have the ability to zoom in on your page so that you can have a better view of this. But you'll notice at the bottom, it says that the discount percentage is 70%. Yet, on our discount calculation page, it told us we are a 90% discount district. So why is that 70? This is where the system is automatically calculating that phase out of voice services. It took us from 90 to 70, that's the 20% reduction. Next year, if we happen to also be a 90% district, it is going to take us down to the 50% mark, and so on until we no longer qualify for voice services. I'll close that. Zoom back in a little bit so I can see my screen. But I do want to show you the item 21. We'll click on that link. And here's what the item 21 looks like after we filled it in. But for the sake of the audience today, we're going to add another line item to that. You'll notice here it says we're in the products and services requested, or the item 21. We're going to click on the button Add Line Item. Now, if this information below here was not already inputted, this Add Line Item would still be there. That's how you start your item 21. So we click Add Line Item. Type of service requested is voice. Type of connection. Since our first line item was for local phone service only, our second line item is going to be long distance phone service only. Next drop down is the purpose, says voice, quantity of lines, and this is all information we'd either have loaded into our template or we can manually enter because we've got it prepared ahead of time and sitting with us as we're entering our data. But one thing you will notice, bandwidth, upload speeds, units, download speeds, that has nothing to do with long distance. So the thing is you have to put something in here, so we're putting 0 and at megabits, just so we can get past this point. This is where the system's not perfect yet, but everything else is such a vast improvement. We'll move on down to our monthly recurring eligible costs. Here's the difference I want to point out, a difference from the old application. The old application would ask us what is the total monthly cost. This one has it separated. It wants to know only what the monthly recurring eligible cost is. The next line item wants to know what the monthly recurring ineligible cost is. And with voice service in particular, because there's so many little items that are no longer eligible that were eligible in the past, it's likely that you'll get through PIA a little bit faster if you identify those ineligible costs up front, because then the PIA reviewer knows that you've done your due diligence to find those little items and pull them out of your cost. On the one-time eligible costs and ineligible, we're putting 0 because we're not adding any new services and there's no installation fees associated with it. So now that we've added this new line item, we'll click Save. Once you've saved, now you have to say, well, who's receiving these services? You have a new box that says Manage Recipients. We'll click on that. Because this is long distance, all of our sites use this service, so we'll simply click on the button that says Add All. It's going to give you a screen to verify that you actually want to add all your sites. We'll leave it checked as yes and click Close. Now we have this new line item added for long distance phone service only to the same funding request that happened to include our local phone service. Now granted, you would want to make sure that any services, if you have multiple line items, that it's actually for the same provider and so that your funding requests are all in order. Once we click on Next, it's going to take us back to our landing page. You notice our funding request calculation has now changed. It went from $12,000 to $14,000. We click on that again. The part that I wanted to point out is at the top total charges, it's actually adding the 2 line items you put in, the ineligible with the eligible. Now let's take a look at the item 21 for the wide area network. Again, we already have 1 line item added. We're going to add a second one just because the wide area network can be a little bit more confusing than a simple local or long distance funding request. So let's add a line item. The service requested here is digital transmission services. Type of connection, you'll notice all of these choices. If the IT world is not your area of expertise, please have one of your IT support staff available to help you figure out what type of service. It's not just a high-speed data line. What kind of line is it? For our purposes, we're going to select that it's a lit fiber service. What's the purpose of this lit fiber? Is it transport only, internet only, or is it both transport and internet? Our site has only transport. And how many lines do we have? We have 2 lines. Now the bandwidth upload speed, we have 10 gigs up and 10 gigs down. Burstable bandwidth, we don't have any of that. Basic firewall protection included? No, we don't have that either. Is this a last mile connection? Ross, could you maybe help us understand exactly what a last mile connection is?
Sure. The last mile is the wide area network connection, or the connection from any location like your district office, your county office of ed, or your internet service provider to your school site premise. That's considered the last mile.
Okay. So I think with this application then, this would be a last mile connection.
Okay.
But what is a WAN? The next question is this a WAN?
Well, that's a good question. Since you picked before up above that the purpose of the line is transport, that means that the district has a wide area network. And simply that means that the sites are connected together. Or if you, in this case, we would put WAN. If the site was directly to the internet, each of your schools went directly to the internet, then you wouldn't put WAN. A WAN is when your network is kind of like a private network between your school sites. Single school site that goes to the internet, not a WAN. School site that goes directly to the internet, not a WAN. But in this case, since we're using this as a network for our own district, and then it goes out to the internet, it's considered a wide area network or a WAN.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll do the same thing and put in our eligible monthly cost as well as our ineligible cost. And on this one, we happen to have a very minor amount of ineligible cost for service fees. We're not adding any new services, so we don't have any one-time costs to consider. Now we'll save this new funding request, or new line item, I should say. And you'll notice a new box has appeared. We've already discussed what managed recipients is, which specific sites are receiving the service. But this says we have 2 remaining. So what they're saying is on a wide area connection or a high-speed network connection, you have to indicate exactly which sites are receiving what service. You can't do everybody's receiving wide area network or everybody's receiving high-speed data lines. So in this particular case, our admin building is receiving one of these lines, and our Hilltop Children's Center is receiving the other. Click Close. Now we have 0 remaining. We've assigned both lines. Now it could be that our admin officer is receiving both lines. If that's the case, we would simply come to the left side of the screen and click on the Edit button, where we could then edit how many lines are going to a specific facility. With that being done, we'll click on Next, which will take us back to our funding request landing page. We now have our new information that has shown up in our funding request. And you'll notice at the bottom of the screen here that this one is actually calculating at the 90% discount because it recognizes its wide area network, its digital transmission services, which is not subject to the phase down. So that is the funding request area in jest. Please take your time to get familiar with it, and you can go in and out of all the different areas rather quickly by going back to this landing page. To demonstrate, here we go to the discount calculations, which then takes us to where we can see each site. We go to our funding request, which takes us to our landing page where we can see each funding request. Now that we're done, we're getting ready now to submit our form. But first we have to make all of the certifications that we follow the rules. I encourage you to at least read through these certifications once because it does remind you of certain specific rules related to the Form 471 that you should have followed. And if you find yourself out of line with anything, make sure you can get yourself back in line in case you're ever audited. You can say that you followed the rules. Now, because we said that this was an application for a school, it's only going to ask you questions that are relative to a school district. One area I want to highlight is item D, right here. Ask you about a total budgeted amount allocated to resources not eligible for E-rate support. What exactly are they looking for? Well, E-rate does not pay for certain things, and yet it requires you to have them in place in order to best take advantage of the services E-rate does pay for. For example, staff development, making sure that your teachers and students are able to use the internet, that they have the proper education. Obviously, the teachers would be responsible for educating the students, but who's responsible for educating the teachers and your administrators, your office staff? That would be staff development. Other resources would be your electrical needs to support the heating and air conditioning that support your servers, as well as electrical needs that keep all of your switches and everything else running. All of the servers that perhaps E-Rate has purchased for you or assisted in purchasing, as well as the switches, those you need to make sure that they're up and running. Again, an example of something E-Rate purchased, but you have to provide additional funds in order to make sure they're best taken advantage of. Russ, did you have any other thoughts on what other resources not eligible for E-Rate support you might want to consider?
You know, your HVAC, those are, you know, besides IT staff, of course, is HVAC upgrades, because those things are happening. Your power upgrades, as you start to go to like power over Ethernet switches, centralizing your servers, anything that could be used in support of the technology that keeps it running, whether it be people, power, facilities type of things.
And E-Rate's not looking to nail you down to the penny on this budget. It is an estimate, but they want an estimate based on real data. So whatever you choose to put in here, be sure you can back it up in the long run and not just simply grab a figure out of the air. As we scroll down to the bottom, after we've checked all the certifications, it's going to ask us about the authorized signer. Is that person the same as the primary contact person named earlier? If it was and you select yes, that person's information is filled in as much as available on the form, where you only have a few areas left to fill in, such as title and position. But if you select no, then you will fill in all of that information from scratch of who that authorized signer is. And then when you scroll to the bottom, you will have the opportunity to review the application, submit the application, and then the final step would be to certify. Now, submitting the application is a huge step, but it's not completed yet until you certify it. Now, certifying online requires that the authorized person have a PIN assigned to them. You can't have the authorized person use the contact person's PIN. That authorized person needs to have their own. And if they do not, then they would want to display and print the certification, sign the paper copy, and mail it in. Once the SLD receives that paper form, it will generate them or cause them to generate a PIN and send it to the authorized signer. So at this point, it takes us to the end of our application. And you'll notice I didn't check off any of these certifications, so it's telling me I have a lot to do before I can actually submit my form. It changed all the letters to red. In order to exit at this point, because I'm not ready to submit, I click back one level to funding request. I can go to any one of these levels. It will allow me to then save the form and log out. So now that you've gotten to see the form a little bit, let's talk a little bit about some of the templates. We mentioned that there are specific areas of the form where templates are available, but not all areas. So now on slide 13, to access the templates, we've provided the links here. There's several templates available, but they only really affect two areas of the form, your discount calculations template and your item 21. And depending on the size of your district or how complex your funding request is, you may or may not choose to use the templates. That'll be an individual decision. They're not mandatory. They are certainly optional. These templates are all include macros and drop-down menus. So it's very important that you don't interfere with those in order for your upload to function properly. Only use the templates that are provided on the website. Don't create your own because they simply won't work. It's also important to use the correct version of Excel. Anything older than 2007 will cause issues in the upload. So if you don't have a newer version of Excel, then you're pretty much limited to not being able to use the template. But if you are using them, then it's important that you try to enter the data from left to right, one row at a time. You're not going to be able to copy down or copy right. The drop-down menus just simply won't allow that. You can copy and paste text into specific fields, and should you do so, slide 15 gives some directions on how to do that. If you're copying from an external source, you want to use the paste special text command. But if you're copying from another template or another spreadsheet, then you want to use the paste values command, and that's the only way you'll be allowed to copy within that spreadsheet. Slide 16 gives us a little visual of some of the features of the spreadsheet. The particular one we're looking at on this slide is the discount calculations template. And all of the templates have this particular feature, which is the triangle in the upper corner of any given field, header field. Once you hover over that triangle, you'll get some additional directions from USAC, trying to help you know exactly what is supposed to be entered into that field. Slide 17 shows us the drop-down menus. Once you click into a field, the drop-down box will appear, and you can only enter one of those selections. You can't enter anything that's different from that. So sometimes, especially when you get to the item 21 section, you're trying to make a square peg fit into a round hole. So just do the best you can, and that's where it's important to get the viewpoint perhaps of an IT director on, like I mentioned earlier, what kind of lines do you actually have? They're not just simply high-speed data lines. They have, there's a type. So in this particular drop-down menu, type of service requested, you have your options, and depending on which one you select, let's say we select voice services, then slide 19 shows us in column B, only the selections that affect voice services would appear in the drop-down menu. The same would be true if in column A we selected digital transmission services, then column B would only give you items that affect digital transmission services. Now, the templates are very useful in collecting a lot of the information to help you complete your funding request, and it's most useful if you have multiple line items from the same service provider. But again, it may not be useful for every situation, so it's up to you to decide whether you should use it or not. But with the idea of planning ahead, Russ is going to take us through some of the things that we need to have ahead of time before we start our Form 471.
On slide 22, some of these are what you are used to as you've been doing E-rate for a few years now. But there's no template available for some of the following items. We already mentioned earlier at the beginning, Rachel did the nickname for the form. Service type, you need to know which areas you're applying for, and again, break it out into a separate 471 for Category 1 versus Category 2. Establishing the Form 470, that's the number that you'll need to have in front of you, as well as the service provider identification number, the quotes, the total dollar amounts. That's the important information to have. Your billing account number, service information in terms of is it month-to-month contracted, the contract award date, the contract expiration, service start date, and if there was any volunteer extensions. A couple of things here on slide 23 remind you that in our past trainings we encourage you to stick with 3 or 5 year terms. That's the new culture, so to speak, at the FCC that they like to see us to go out to bid a little bit more, so 3 and 5 year terms, as well as I encourage you to just print off last year's Form 471 and double check that information with the actual hard copy of the quote, or hard copy of the 471 that you have. So if we go to slide 24, state master contract, yes or no. This, if you've been using it for voice services, you're probably already aware of that. So that would be typically what we've seen schools and libraries use the CalNet 3 for. And then the other thing, you want to make sure that you have last year's Form 471 information, because if it's a multi-year contract, the FRN from the prior year will need that information. Narrative of the service, as well as the pricing, confidentiality, yes or no is a question that will be asked. And in California, I think in most cases, but please check with your procurement manager or your business person. It is not confidential, and so that's something that you do need to check at the district level, the comfort level. And the whole purpose that you'll see from this new 471 is transparency on pricing for data networks. There's going to be some definite data that they use for harvesting to see how we're doing as a nation and relative to E-rate and the pricing, and if there's disparities of higher pricing in one area or another. So. On slide 25, you enter in the item 21 services, and it can be a single line or multiple lines. Select who receiving, managed entity, or one or more sites. Enter as many FRNs to cover your eligible services. Review and submit the form, and certify to complete the process. Make sure you go back and double check your 471 status to say that it's certified. That's very important because we've had districts in the past that submit it and get maybe interrupted, and they forget to certify it. Either since you have time, you could do it writing and sign it if it's a new superintendent or CBO, assistant or if you're doing electronically, please go back and check the status of your 471 to make sure it says certified. So here's this link that we have on the K-12 HSN website. It's a step-by-step of filling out the Form 471 on slide 26. And for contact information, Jared at the library side, and then Department of Ed has a general mailbox that Doris and others monitor. So there's the E-rate at CDE, and then you also have my contact information. So we're going to first check for any chat questions, and we'll open it for the phone bridge.
We do have a couple of questions on chat. The first one says, I just got a quote for wireless access point, and they put on a separate line item the service support. Is that basic maintenance?
Yep, the service support for the wireless access point or other electronics for Category 2 is considered basic maintenance. License the hardware, that's considered a one-time internal connection purchasing.
And does basic maintenance affect my Category 2 budget?
Good question. Yes, it does. Your budget is, again, based on $150 per student, pre-discount, per site. That's a site base. So anything you use, whether it be basic maintenance or one-time hardware purchases or licenses, will count against the budget for that site. And remember that your site, it isn't like you have your budget, you use 100% of it, and then you pay, the FCC will pay 100% of your budget. Like, for example, if your budget for a school site is $10,000 and your discount is 85%, it doesn't mean if I have $50,000 in my budget for my school site and I only spend 10 that I don't have to pay any money. It means on a $10,000 purchase with an 85% discount, if your budget has more than $10,000, you'll have to pay $1,500 matching. So I guess one way to look at it is you always have to have some skin in the game for every purchases that you do with your E-rate Category 2 budget.
Okay, we have another question. I just heard there was another Form 470 posted by the state for CalNet 3 that included internet access. Is this true, and can I use this form?
Oh, another good question. Unfortunately, the answer is no. The timing of the Form 470 for the internet access did not align with the RFP bidding process. However, we are in discussions with CalNet 3, the OTEC people, that maybe next year we'll have a CalNet 3 internet access Form 470 for to use, but at this point in time for this year's window, no, we do not.
So even though, just adding a little bit of detail behind that, even though there was a second Form 470 posted, as Russ mentioned, it's not a viable form to use because of the timing of it. It just simply didn't line up with the bidding process.
Any other questions? Well, we'll go ahead and open up the phone bridge.
Okay, the phone bridge is open. Do we have any questions?
Okay. Well, we want to thank everyone for your time and energy towards this and appreciate it. Again, the window extension doesn't mean wait a few more weeks. We really encourage you to try to treat as much as you can that the window is closing on March 26th because you will need the additional bid entry time. It's a new form. Technology, sometimes those websites just have an issue, and I don't want anyone to be in a pressure point at the last minute, so we really encourage you to keep working your diligence, and we realize this is a lot of hard work for everyone, and on behalf of Rachel and I and our programs, appreciate that work for helping out the schools getting E-rate discounts. So everyone have a good day. Thank you.